Lance, you're welcome to come up here. That I talked to Lance about last night would be that the city would move forward with some feasibility work, answer the questions we have, which is this new tank the most cost-effective solution? And then also looking and making sure that we have, when they take tanks out of service, eliminate 2 tanks and replace it with this larger tank. That hydraulically, we're not going to impact fire flow in the system and a number of issues like that. Landon will move forward with that work, and so I'm going to change my recommendation to you that we proceed with design-only services for a new tank or tank lids, as the case may be, going forward. And that appropriation Ryan, you call it set aside for design and yeah, so Mr. Chairman, that would be an appropriation of $329,000. We will verify that that is the exact number, but that's my recollection. So that would, so I'm changing my recommendation that we move this, and this would not be an amendment as it's shown in the schedule. This would become a new project. We'll move up and become a different project. But that's what I recommend you do this afternoon.
All right. Harry, do you have any comments on land?
Yes, Chairman. Commission, thank you very much for this opportunity. We think this is a great thing for Vancouver, and we're more than happy to start the feasibility studies to make sure that we're spending the dollars appropriately for funding the best solutions for this. Appreciate the time and happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions? Since that's an amended project, that's probably appropriate to do it as a separate motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree. The actual number is $329,500.
We have a motion by Commissioner Glick to approve the design phase at $329,500. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Commissioner Geis. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries, and we'll strike that off for the future block motion. We hope we still get to that. Harry, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, tab M is the next project, which is a small water project program. And Jody Pavlik, our project manager, has put together kind of a history of the appropriations that have been made. And this is for account 1. So this is new small water development projects. And you can see that in terms of the appropriations that have been made over the years, 12, 14, 15, we're running anywhere from starting at an additional 200,000, 300,000, 600, 500, 750, and 750. And then at the bottom of this page shows you the number of account applications since 2012, sponsors, and what the account 1 project cost was. And as you can see, the program is becoming more popular. We have more sponsors that are pursuing this fund, and so for 2019, we're estimating there could be upwards of 80 applications for this funding. Again, our maximum contribution on any project is $35,000. Number of sponsors, we think there's potentially 16 sponsors. These would be conservation districts primarily across the state. So we're thinking potentially we may need $2.1 million this coming year. These applications are due December 31st of each year. And when we look at the balance, the uncommitted balance, which is up above, presently available, 139,000, proposed increase, we're recommending an increase of $2 million into this water development account 1 fund, and that would give us about 2.1 million, which is again what our prediction or our estimate for funding going into next year would be. Questions?
If we approve this as a commission, does the Select Water Committee have to vote on it today?
Mr. Chairman, not today. Again, this would, so. Nope. The small water development project was initially issued or initially authorized in 2002. Appropriation conditions. And then I want to say in 2014, it was reauthorized. And so the way the program works, the criteria for the program is in place, but the appropriation has in essence been spent. So what we do is we amend the appropriation amount in the construction bill, and then that provides additional dollars going forward.
Thank you. Any other questions of Harry? All right. Go ahead, Harry.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. Next one is the Sponsors Contingency Fund. And initially, this was called the Sponsors Inflation Fund a number of years ago. It was reauthorized as the Sponsors Contingency Fund, but it's a separate pool of money that is authorized for the commission to use when we have a project that comes in over budget. And it's typically after we've accepted bids on the project and we find that we do not have adequate funding, the commission can then use this fund to supplement the budget with Select Water Committee approval. And currently, we have uncommitted funds in this account for as $974,000 and some change. My concern is as the economy improves in the state, that we are going to be seeing higher prices in our bidding. We know that tariffs are coming into play, and oftentimes steel is an important component in our projects. And when that happens, you're going to see projects that were authorized 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the bids are going to come in high. And so I'm asking that we place an additional $1 million into this account. It would give us a balance of about $1.9 million. You can see that the original appropriation in 06 was a $2 million appropriation. And then we've given you a history of projects that have been approved for Sponsors Contingency Fund, and the highest one being $392,000. So my concern is that we could have 2 or 3 or more projects this coming year that come in, and I want to make sure there's adequate funding in this account to fund that. So my request is to place an additional $1 million appropriation into the Sponsors Contingency Fund for account 1, so new development. We have a companion recommendation for account 2 on this as well. Question?
Any questions of Harry? Go ahead, Harry.
So, Mr. Chairman, the next one under tab N, I would describe as housekeeping. And so for years and years, we have required, actually it's a statutory requirement, that when a project is funded, the sponsor needs to set up a repair and maintenance sinking fund. And we've had a number of discussions at the commission level of what those funds, how big should those funds be. And the way that becomes a requirement is that on every construction bill, we go back and reference a previous construction bill, general conditions. It's Wyoming Statute 99-3-103 for new development, 104 for rehab, and 106 for dams and reservoirs. And that's been the norm, and that was in the 2018 construction bill. But then the legislature last year passed Enrolled Act number 6, and it changes the requirements for O&M accounts. And as you read there, for each, these are the three bullets and after the middle of the page. These are kind of conditions in Enrolled Acts number 6. For each new project, the commission shall require a sponsor to demonstrate that the entity has authority to adequately assess fees or collect funds to cover operation and maintenance expenses. It goes on there. It goes, an operation and maintenance account shall only be required for project sponsors that have taken out a loan. And then funds required in any operation maintenance account shall not exceed 10%. And with loans, once the loan's paid off, then the obligation for an O&M account goes away. So most of the entities we deal with are governmental entities. They have taxing authority. They can assess fees. So I believe that most of our sponsors can adequately show that they have the ability to raise funds for O&M. So what that means to me is that we will now not be requiring O&M funds for most of the sponsors that we deal with. Because this is new legislation that went into effect July 1st of this year, I do expect that there will be sponsors that have O&M account funds that were authorized under the old program that will request that we do away with those. And in talking with Daniel, because those projects were authorized with these other repair and maintenance sinking funds, the cleanest way is to go back and amend. I'm going to suggest amending the 2017 bill, construction bill, and the 18 bill to say you no longer are required to have the repair and maintenance funds. We'll delete that language that requires it, is basically what we will do. And then if they want to proceed with out a repair and maintenance fund, it will be under the new conditions, and we will evaluate it at that time. And it may require a contract amendment with some of these previous sponsors, but do expect that we will have requests to do that. So that's why I call it a housekeeping based on the most recent intent expressed by the legislature, which is this Enrolled Act number 6. Questions?
Sweetwater Committee. You guys sponsored it, and your thinking was what?
Senator Hicks?
I didn't hear the question. I said your thinking was what here?
You'll remember the discussion, because I think we had this at the joint meeting a year ago. The discussion was if they have taxing authority already or the ability to levy fees. Historically, those maintenance fees have been assessed, but what the reality of what happens is, and especially some of the smaller irrigation districts and water conservancy districts, they were tying up more capital in some cases than what their annual operating budget was. And the fact that they could go back under emergency situation and assess fees anyway become a little bit problematic when your overall operating budget's $15,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 a year, and you got producers' fees because of the contingents or because of the operation and maintenance. In some cases, the one that I'm intimately familiar with had like $60,000 in CDs just sitting there that weren't doing anything. And it was tying up capital from all those producers that are members of those irrigation and conservancy districts. It didn't make any sense to tie up $60,000 or whatever that percentage of their capital was when they could do a special assessment and cover any cost for operation and maintenance. So that was the rationale.
Special assessment is in Enrolled Act number 6. Then I guess where I'm at is we have a lot of instances where we require that so that we don't get hit up because people haven't done it. So we're having to spend a lot of money to that we may not have had to spend had these people had these O&M accounts.
I think already in your existing criteria, anybody that's been funded for a project for 15 years is not eligible to come back for funding to the commission at that point in time. So once you get past that 15-year period, you still have project officers that can go out and make a determination of whether there was adequate operation and maintenance. If that's the case, that there was a lack of inadequate operation and maintenance, you're not obligated to provide those funds to those legal entities if they haven't done their maintenance requirements. You have that discretion as the commission right now to reject those applications for derelict maintenance responsibility.
Let me suggest that this bill has been passed last session.
Yeah.
We're making a procedural revision. So discussion of the merits is probably not very productive. With that, Commissioner Bettis?
I guess where I'm at is that then I think we need to make our requirements reflect what you just said. Yeah. That we have the ability to not grant these funds if these guys don't have the funds.
So, Mr. Chairman, what Senator Hicks is referencing is a provision in our operating criteria so that you have that authority right now. What the new legislation says is that any entity that does not have the authority or ability to collect operation and maintenance or sufficient funds for operation and maintenance of the project may be required to establish an operation and maintenance account. So if we will look at each sponsor individually, again, most of them have the ability to levy taxes and collect fees. So I think that will exclude them from the need for an O&M account. But if they don't, you have the ability to say, no, we're going to insist on an O&M account in this case.
This is, you'll bring that to our attention, or the commission's attention, when somebody applies.
Mr. Chairman, we would, and something that we have not followed up with is this statute also gives you the authority to develop operating criteria with regards to this. So that's a future task that I see in front of the commission.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. That leaves us with a block motion to approve the level 3 projects amendments, remembering that J and K have been tabled and number L has already been acted on. So do we have a motion to that effect?
Mr. Chairman, since I've been quiet on this end,
Okay.
I move that we accept the director's recommendation for level 3 projects amendments for Casper Zone 3 improvements, small water projects, new development, sponsors contingency fund, and I guess make that change for the legislative revision for repair and maintenance sinking funds.
Thank you. Second. Okay, motion made by Commissioner Seacon and second by Commissioner Lancaster. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. That takes us to level 2 projects there.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, we have one project going forward. It's an account 2 study, or excuse me, level 2 study. That is the Lake DeSmet Healy Reservoir Utilization Study. It's going to look at 2 things. One, placing potentially a low-level outlet in Healy Reservoir. Currently, any water that's released from the reservoir has to be pumped out of that reservoir. So it would be theoretically an O&M cost savings going forward, but there will be an initial capital cost. So we want to look at the feasibility of doing that. And then secondly, looking at the ability, what it would take from an infrastructure perspective to move water from Lake DeSmet in terms of our accounts there into the Tongue River Basin. And in so doing, that offers a number of opportunities. If we get a call from Montana, and based on the Montana v. Wyoming litigation, post-1950 water rights are in jeopardy if that call is ultimately honored. And this would allow us a mechanism to move water from DeSmet, which is in the Powder River Basin, into the Tongue to allow those out-of-priority diversions to continue. And specifically, we're interested in reservoirs in the Tongue that have these post-1950 water rights that they might be precluded from storing water during the springtime, which is when we would expect a call from Montana. And the main calling party in Montana is Tongue River Reservoir. The litigation or the settlement deals with certain water levels in the Tongue River Reservoir, and we can place a call. So The engineer that was selected through your most recent process was N-Tech, and their cost proposal came in right at $268,000.
Can we have a motion to approve the Lake DeSmet Healy Reservoir utilization project? Unless there's questions, excuse me. Are there questions? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I entertain that motion.
Motion made by Commissioner Wagner, seconded by Commissioner Lancaster. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries, and that's an exciting possibility of being able to transfer water to the Tongue River. So, all right. Harry, that takes us to level 1 projects in Crook County.
Okay, Mr. Chair, under tab P is the Crook County Rural Water Supply Plan. We talked about it this morning. This is a new application. We're recommending a budget of $250,000, and ultimately, if it's approved by the legislature, it will require a procurement process to select an engineer there. And Commissioner Wheatland is here, been waiting all morning to discuss this project. So I think with that, I would stand discussion.
You've heard about the Crook County project in connection with the Gillette Madison project. Are there any questions of Harry or Commissioner Whelan?
I move the project.
Okay. Well, I think we'll try to do that as part of, do you want to move the project right now or wait till, let's make it a model project, part of the whole block, okay? So no questions, thank you, Commissioner Whelan.
Don't leave. They might have one.
We're not going anywhere.
Mr. Chairman, the next project under tab Q is the Evanston Water Master Plan. Looking at the last system master plan was done in 1997 for Evanston. We've gone out for selection of engineers on this one in Evanston. On this project, we have selected William H. Smith with a budget of $126,000. Questions?
Go ahead.
Under tab R then is a request. This is a request from Water Development to fund the remaining 2 phases for Stream Stats. And Stream Stats is a very robust hydrologic, I don't want to say modeling, but a hydrology model that USGS has done for other states. It allows you to take a drainage that may not have any stream gauging in it and provide all of the flows based on the drainage characteristics. Peak flows, 100-year floods, probable maximum flows, 2-year routine repeating flows. And so we currently have going forward phases 1 and 2 of Stream Stats. This funding would be 3 and 4 to finish out that project. Phase 3 will consist of developing stream flow statistics for locations in the state where stream gauges exist. And then phase 4 is the computational portion of Stream Stats, which develops the regression equations for estimating stream flow characteristics at locations where the streams or the drainages are ungauged. And so you will be able to, through this model, be able to pick any drainage basin, pick the point that you're interested in, and Stream Stats will give you then these critical flows that you can use for, can be used for structure design, culvert design, river basin planning needs. It can be used for, one of the questions that we're asked to answer for the state engineer on in-stream flows is what is the 20% frequency of occurrence of flows in this basin, and then you compare that with water rights and you can provide the answer to the state engineer, which is our feasibility study. So it's a very powerful again, computational tool, and we're seeking the funding to basically finish it. The proposed budget, $631,000.
Questions of Harry?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hicks?
really real quick, Harry, I mean, it talks about phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. How many phases, or is there additional phase 5 that would be looking at additional expenditures down the road for the stream stats modeling?
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that this completes stream stats 1 through 4, but I will look to my river basin planning person, 4 phases. This completes stream stats for the state of Wyoming.
All right, thank you.
Senator Meyer?
Yeah, the question, Harry, I have, you know how I love models. What's the accuracy on this, and as far as, you know, a plus or minus percentage on a volume that is supposed to be in a stream at any one time based on the input characteristics? And if we had more stream gauges, how much more accurate can we get? And that's any analysis on that, because models are like computer programs. They're garbage in, garbage out. If you haven't got enough, you can get I think an overall picture with this, but it's still a model, and it's you're going to have some variances. So what's our variance?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Meyer, you can't really, so with stream stats in an ungauged stream, you can calculate what is the estimated 100-year flood event, okay? But there's really no data to compare that to. So you get a flood that comes down through here, and you measured it and say, okay, but when it comes down doesn't carry a 100-year flood tag so that you can compare it to the model. What you use this is the best available science to generate what is the predicted 100-year flood. And in so doing, then you can design structures to that. But it goes back to the stream gauges we have, because that is phase 3. We look at those stream gauge systems, and then what the model does is compare the drainage characteristics for where you have a stream gauge to the next drainage that doesn't have stream gauge. And it starts to look at the topography, the vegetation. So that's done across the state, so we will be able to use that. Right now, when we do that for in-stream flow studies, we're spending $30,000 to $50,000 per study for just several stream segments. So this system could be used to replace the consultants that then go through and they look at gauge, they're doing the exact same thing, only on this very isolated basis. They look at gauge systems, they compare that to the drainages we're interested in. They develop the empirical formulas to calculate what are the predicted flows. But it puts all of that technology into one package. And I don't know if that's a good answer for your question, but it's a predictive tool.
Senator Hicks?
Mr. Chairman, just one more question. So is this proprietary software, and then what exactly are we paying for with the 630? Is it to go out and collect the parameters to stick in, as you just alluded, the existing stream gauge data, slope, topography, soils, vegetation, precip, elevation? So I'm just curious really what we're actually getting for $631,000.
So, Mr. Chairman, let me start by saying it is not proprietary, but what it does is require a lot of data gathering so that you can put that into the model on this landscape basis, and we contract with USGS. This is basically the system that they're developing, and with that, I'll introduce.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission and Sweetwater, yes, I'm Jody Pring. I'm with the Water Development Office. Yeah, Harry's right. It's not a proprietary software. It's used all across the United States. There's only 2 states left, Wyoming being one of them, that doesn't have this already incorporated. And What we're paying for is the work that USGS is doing. So oftentimes when we have stream gauges, we'll do a cost share with them. That's basically what we're doing with this project. We will be able to give them some guidance on those things that we want to have modeled. So we can tell them, do we want peak flow frequencies? Do we want mean flows? Do we want annual flows? Those are the kind of things that we would be able to have input into as to what we would want them to calculate for us so we could run those statistical equations that they'll come up with.
But just one more follow-up. So is this a cost share with USGS, or are we funding this at 100% for USGS to do this for the state of Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, that's a cost share.
What is that ratio, Mr. Chairman?
The ratio is, I believe, 65-35.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Glick.
No, Jody, this, you could keep adding information so that it would become more and more accurate on down the road.
Mr. Chairman, yes, that we could absolutely do that. And we could also, once those statistics are run and we have those basin characteristics in place, we can actually change the types of questions that we could ask it as well. Ask the model.
Thanks.
I'm going to find a different word.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I do have just a, who's the 65?
Mr. Chairman, the state of Wyoming is 65 and USGS is 35.
And just, Mr. Chairman, when do we expect this to be available for use within the state of Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, we are looking at about December of 2021.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Meyer.
Question I have, in the other states that have implemented this, how many times does this data show up in a courtroom? And is it actually reliable enough for people to, I guess, use it effectively?
Mr. Chairman, I couldn't answer the question of how many times it's shown up in a courtroom. I'm not sure about that. I can tell you that there are states using stream stats and they're making decisions based on the information that is coming out of stream stats. So they're feeling confident that they're getting good answers from the questions that they're asking this model.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions on this project? Thank you, Jody. Harry? We'll move on to Salt Creek Edgerton Midwest Master Plan.
Chairman, level 1 study, we're looking for a master plan. The selection process you went through on October 5th is between Morris and Maryland. That's the study.
I know Midwest is here. Do you have anything to add? Come on up.
I think so.
Okay.
I'm Michelle from Salt Creek Joint Powers Board, Midwest Edgerton. We appreciate that you guys looked at this. We've been having issues that we just think need to be looked at. Hopefully we can come up with something different than what we're doing.
All right, any questions of Midwest or Harry? No questions. Thank you, Michelle. Harry, the Torrington Water Master Plan.
Yes, Chairman. So Torrington is also seeking a master plan. Last one was done in the 1995-96 timeframe. This also has gone through your consultant selection process. You have selected ABI to do this work, and the budget is $174,000.
Any questions on the Torrington Water Master Plan? All right. As far as the motion, if we did a block motion on level 1 projects, I think it would include approval of the Crook County late filing. So I think I'm fine with a motion that would approve the level 1 project block. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Motion made by Commissioner Little and seconded by Commissioner Wagner. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion is approved.
Chairman, moving then to what is labeled as general or other requests. First one is the Groundwater Grant Program. And initially authorized in 1981, and it allows the commission to cost share for new potable water wells for municipalities, water districts, improvement service districts, those that are in the business of providing drinking water to our citizens. The way the program is structured is that water development would pay 75% of the well drilling cost, local share 25%, up to a maximum of $400,000 per project. And over the years, you see the history where started in 1981 with a $3 million appropriation, and there have been supplemental appropriations since then that total now $6.8 million. The remaining balance in this program is $314,000 and some change. And that is probably enough to drill one more well. I am suggesting to you and recommending to you that you supplement this appropriation again with an additional $2 million appropriation, which would make total authorized funds to 8.8 in that particular case. But that allows you to continue funding these wells. Most recently, we funded a well for Big Pining and one for the County Bird Center.
Any questions about this increased grant program recommendation? Harry, transfer of funds from Buffalo Bill Reservoir account.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, we talked a little bit yesterday that at least statutorily, the Title 99-99-1003 directs that if the commission deems any of the funds in these accounts, the reservoir O&M accounts, to be in excess of what is needed for the purpose of those accounts, that those funds are to be transferred to Water Development Account 1. 2 years ago, the legislature put in place a statute that requires that legislative approval is required before that transfer can occur. And so at your August meeting, looking at the Buffalo Bill Reservoir O&M account, we recommended to you and you agreed that $5.5 million is in fact surplus and should be transferred to Water Development Account 1. My recommendation to you is that because legislative approval is needed, that we seek a transfer not to account 1 but to account 2. And the reason is that in account 2, we have about $9 million in available funds and $23 million in requests. Not all of those requests are ready to proceed, I believe, but the influx of an additional $5.5 million will allow you to fund some projects that right now my recommendation is no, due to lack of available funding. So with that, I can answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions on this recommended transfer?
Mr. Chairman, appreciate the director trying to make this work out. So I got a little lost. How many more projects would we pick up if we went over to account 2 with this money rather than account 1? What would that open the door for?
So there are 5 projects that I am currently recommending no funding for because we don't have the available funds. Those 6 projects. And the $5.5 million would more than cover those 5 projects, plus we'll leave a balance of, I think, about $2 million into the account. And I think that's important for future years because, for example, right now, Wheatland Irrigation Tunnel Dam, we've got a $5.2 million request. I'm recommending $388,000 in funding for design only. So I know in a year or a year and a half or 2 years, they will be back to request for construction funding. Account 2 will still be low at that point in time. So I'm recommending that the full 5.5 placed in account 2. But for this session, I don't have the exact total, but it's about a $2.5 million, $2.5 million of projects that could be funded with it this year.
Other questions, Senator Dockstader?
Yeah. I'm tracking you on that, except for you said 5 projects, and I'm looking for where they're at, so.
Okay, so the projects that right now have recommended no funding would be the Dry Creek Irrigation District Rehab for $1,628,000. Eden Valley Irrigation District System Improvements, this is their sand trap project for $351,000. And then 3 studies, Boulder Irrigation District Rehabilitation for $171,000. LaPrele Irrigation District Rehabilitation for $290,000. And then the Upper Bluff Irrigation District Master Plan for $123,000.
Thank you, Director. So we have to, if we move this out at this level, then we'd have to come around legislatively and handle this in January. Is that what I'm understanding then?
Mr. Chairman, my thoughts is that I will place this transfer of funds in the construction bill. And so it will be a separate section within the construction bill that ultimately, yes, the legislature needs to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions on the transfer of funds? All right. Barry, that takes us then to the UW Water Research Program. And Mr. Kerr.
Chairman, I'll hand it over to Mr. Kerr at this point.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Water Development Commission, Select Water. I'm Greg Kerr. I direct the Office of Water Programs at the University of Wyoming. Under that program, we administer the Water Research Program, which we're presenting today. If you recall, at the June meeting, you approved, both the Water Development Commission and Select Water approved the request for proposals for the University of Wyoming to issue an RFP. And that RFP for water-related research projects was issued the end of August. At the end of August, there was a submittal date of October 2nd in that RFP. We received 8 proposals under that RFP to address priorities that were issued in that RFP for state priorities looking at water research. In your notebooks, you'll see that the explanation that we usually put in there and the timetable, those 8 proposals that we received, information on those proposals is listed in the next pages. All of those proposals went through our review process in October. And October 29th, the Advisory Committee for the Water Research Program reviewed the proposals themselves and also went over all peer reviews that were obtained for the proposals. Also at that meeting, all of those proposals were ranked. So the last page in that section lists the proposals and the rankings for those proposals. One thing, if you'll notice on all of these proposals, the titles do not include Beaver, climate change, or Gillette.
You can.
If you will notice on page 7, the committee rankings for those proposals were ranked from 1 to 8. This year we did something a little different. They're put in tiers. The explanation for those tiers is listed there, but basically the top 2 proposals were listed in 1 tier. Those points between those 2 top ranked proposals was very small. Yet the difference between those top two proposals, tier 1 and tier 2, there was a larger point difference. So we decided to put those within different tiers to show you how the rankings compared. Again, from tier 2 to tier 3, you see the rankings there. 11 points difference were between tier 2 and tier 3 was 18 points. Okay, so 11 points and 18 points between the various tiers. So the ranking came out with proposal A and H as the top two ranked proposals. They address two of the top priorities that we had in our RFP. One of those, number 1, came out looking at, as we had a discussion actually in June, about E. coli, and we did have a proposal on E. coli. So that was rated our number 1 based on the committee's reviews, the quality of the proposal, and this particular proposal, the PIs had visited with stakeholders in the state, DEQ, Game and Fish, and the conservation districts, and working with them to look at this proposal. The second proposal, an ongoing issue of sediment behind dams, was listed as the number 2 ranked proposal. If you recall, problems with willwood, this specifically is going to address some of those problems with willwood and other areas in the state with the dams. Then it dropped down to tier 2, but tier 1, those 2 projects were brought forward with a recommendation for funding from our committee, and that's what I would like to present to you today.
Any questions of Greg on these proposals? Well, hearing none, thank you, Greg. Senator Meyer.
On proposal A, that has to do with E. coli, it looks like, and you're asking to identify, I guess, management decisions to reduce the likelihood of those pathogens. And the last time I think we addressed this, the people advised ranchers to fence out every riparian area and every creek. So I'm wondering if this is the road we're going down again. I just wanted to bring that up for a little discussion, whether or not that's what could be the outcome of this.
Mr. Chairman, there was no indication of that in the proposal to address anything like that, but it's more of information. And what I would say is this particular study, we've had this in our RFP for several years. I think this is a starting point for gathering information on all types of pathogens, and E. coli as one of the particular issues that's looked at by not only the ag community, but also DEQ and certain standards that were developed. So I think this will be a valuable project to provide us with information to move on further and maybe coming up with better standards for Wyoming itself and looking at various issues.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, just to add on that to help clarify, if you read the title of it, it's microbial sources to surface water. So I know on part of the discussion that's occurred over the last several years is one of the limitations we have right now in the state of Wyoming is anytime you get E. coli show up, it results in a water quality classification. Typically the implications are that it may be coming from agricultural sources, but right now we don't know what the source is. So the whole intent of a lot of this research is to be able to do microbial tracking. In other words, you can track it back to the individual species, whether it's ducks, muskrats, rabbits, cows, people, dogs. So again, I think Director Kerr is right. This is a very valuable beginning of that research to track the source of that E. coli instead of making broad-based assumptions of what it might be. It starts that process to actually be able to start to identify the sources of that E. coli, which is going to be tremendously valuable for the state of Wyoming.
Any other questions? All All right, now just, oh, Commissioner Glick, sorry.
Forget about all them wild horses out there with E. coli.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that recommendation to the PIs to be sure to look at that.
I think we're done with this block, and if we took a block motion, including the approval of Mr. Kerr's recommendation or the university's recommendation on those, that tier 1, that TBD to be determined would be $350,512. And you can trust my math, I think, on that. And
511.
I guess you can't. 511. Okay. All right. So do I hear a motion approving the project U, V, and W, W being at $350,511?
I'll make that one.
Motion made by Commissioner Bennett, second.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Geis. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Greg. And that takes us on to the WDA 3 program level 3 projects amendments.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and if I might just summarize on account 1, you have handled all of the project recommendations except for the 2 Gillette recommendations, which were tabled, and you intend to take those up tomorrow.
I think, let me think about that and discuss it, but I'm thinking we just take it up first and be done with it and move on to the rest of the agendas as set out.
Mr. Chairman, then moving on to Water Development Account 3, several projects there. First is the Middle Piney Reservoir, and that construction contract has been awarded. Our contractor was working late this summer and into the early fall. But when the project was awarded to Northwest Construction for $11,220,165, we understood that used most of the allowed budget there. It left about 1.1% for construction contingencies. And as we talked about it last June, that number's too low for a construction project. We prefer higher contingencies. So we recommended last June, and this is the follow-up to that recommendation, that we supplement this budget by adding $1,560,000, which will then bring us to a 15% contingency level. And with a project this big and dealing with earthwork that was placed 70 years ago, there's always the concern as you're opening that up. Does it meet the right gradation for rebuilding this dam? Is it too porous? Are there unexpected things that we will or basic unexpected conditions that we will suddenly expose as the contractor is going to work? So I would recommend $1,560,000 from account 3 to supplement this budget. And then if there's questions on that or no questions, then I'll move on to the second part of this recommendation.
Any questions on that? Commissioner Lancaster.
Chairman and Harry, what happens to that money if they don't use it or don't need it?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lancaster, at the end of the project, those dollars will revert back to account 3.
Thank you.
Other questions on this part of it? Go ahead, Harry.
So the second part of this request is to establish a reservoir O&M account in the amount of $500,000. And while this project is owned by the Forest Service, we now have in place a 30-year special use permit, which 1, allows the state to reconstruct the dam, and 2, makes us responsible for operations for the next 30 years. Once construction's done, it'll be 30 years minus the construction period. But we have to have, in terms of our responsibility, we have to have a fund available that if something breaks or if we need to bring in experts to look at any of the issues that might be occurring with a dam, part of the safety of dams operation, that we have a budget to do that. And that's why we establish O&M accounts on all of our other reservoir assets. In this particular situation, we will ultimately be contracting with the Middle Piney Watershed Improvement District for part of those operation needs. But it will not cover necessarily extraordinary O&M expenses that might occur. They will be responsible for operating the facility. So when water is called for downstream, they'll open the gates. But at the end of the day, we have to have a fund available that if we need to bring in an expert or control expert or whatever it might be, that we have the ability to contract with them immediately and pay the bill. So my recommendation is we set this account at $500,000, and we use, and this was discussed at the August meeting, but we use the Buffalo Bill O&M account as the source of those funds. And that's typically, that Buffalo Bill account has been used to supplement other existing O&M accounts, Fontenelle in particular. And so as we set this account up, my recommendation would be to use the Buffalo Bill account for that purpose. Questions?
Mr. Lancaster.
Chairman and Harry, so the water users will have a separate O&M account to deal with their head gates and their tributaries out of there? Mr.
Chairman.
Where's the dividing line?
Yeah, this watershed district is relatively new. It's different than an irrigation district because they are not maintaining delivery system aspects. So head gates and such will be left up to individual landowners, the head gate owners. This watershed district is specific to delivering water out of Middle Piney. So they will contract with, I'll say a dam tender, but some individual that will be authorized to come up and change release rates and inspect the dam. And obviously if there's problems that show up, then they are the first line of defense to say, we have a problem here in terms of the operations. But ultimately, it is the state of Wyoming that's responsible for the safety of that facility through the term of the special use permit.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Harry? Go ahead, Harry. I think we've already handled the next one, I think.
We have, it's identical for storage projects. It's just a reference to a different section in that Title 99 statute. So I guess, do you want to, we could handle that Middle Piney as a vote, or we can run through all the projects, your preference.
Let's approve the Middle Piney Reservoir amendment as presented. Do I have that motion?
I would move that.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Lancaster, second by Commissioner Geis. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries, and that takes us to the level 2 projects.
Mr. Chairman, we have two projects there. First one is under the second tab A, so A2. Grable Valley Irrigation District Storage Enlargement Phase 2. This is a reservoir enlargement. Initially, we were looking at all three of their reservoirs that they have in their asset category. The initial study showed that the most likely or the most cost-effective solution was enlarging the lower Sunshine Reservoir. So we've been doing the Phase 2 feasibility work on that facility. That work is wrapping up, but one of the recommendations we have is to do additional geotechnical investigations on this particular facility, and specifically on one of the abutments that there's some existing seepage on. So what we want to do is better identify what issues there may be there, and in so doing, we can further refine the cost estimates before we get ready to move to the next level, which would be design and permitting. So additional Phase 2 work primarily involved with geotechnical work. $300,000 is the recommended budget.
Questions of Harry on that project? That takes us to the New Fork Lake Dam enlargement, phase 3.
Mr. Chairman, you heard this morning in terms of the closeout memo for really substantial completion of the level 2, phase 2 work, and that's the real feasibility analysis. So we believe that this project is ready to proceed to what we call level 2, phase 3, which is design and permitting. So at this point, we believe we have a feasible project, and we've identified what that's going to be. As you heard, we're talking about lowering the outlet on this structure, and then in essence, rebuilding this structure because it's fairly aged, and to make it a safe facility. So to move forward with phase 3, we're recommending a budget of $1,500,000.
Mr. Noble, if you could introduce yourself and the folks that came with you.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
My name is Zach Noble. I'm with the New Fork Lake Irrigation District. All 5 of our commissioners are here today with me. Dave Noble, Tina Nelson, Sue Stanfeld, and Madeline Murdoch. We're united behind this project and believe in it very much, and we appreciate everything that you guys have done up to this point, and would be grateful and sincerely glad if you continue with this project and funding. Thank you.
Questions of either the irrigation district or Harry? Well, this is good practice, this waiting today, because these dams take a while. But this is a big project, 8,000 acre feet. Is that right, Harry? That would be added. It's a lot of water. So great. Okay. The motion then would be for the 2 level 2 projects as presented. Do I have a motion?
I'll move being in my district, one of them.
A motion made by Commissioner Geis, seconded by Commissioner Glick. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. And then, Harry, we've handled XYZ under the reservoir accounts already?
Correct.
All right. So I think that ends the agenda for today.
Other projects for today.
Well, and the good news is the presentation tomorrow on the Gillette Madison project should be short because we covered it today. So is there a motion is there anything else anybody needs to talk about? How about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Wagner.
Real quick, Josh or Dan, can we leave our stuff here or what's the protocol? Katie? Okay. Cool.
Second by Commissioner Geis. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. I will convene again tomorrow morning.
I'm gonna miss you.
Good luck.